The automatic doors sighed open with a faint chime, letting in a gust of late winter air that carried the faint scent of rain. Inside the small-town supermarket, the lights hummed overhead, cold and unfeeling. The aisles gleamed with polished floors and neatly stacked shelves, bright, colorful, and full of life that seemed to belong to someone else. Sarah's shoes squeaked slightly as she pushed the old, squeaky cart, its one wheel wobbling like it wanted to escape. Her hands were dry, the skin cracked from endless washing, from nights spent cleaning other people's houses for just enough to keep the lights on. Her coat, once a warm olive green, had faded and thinned over time, and now it hung loosely from her shoulders like it was tired, too. In the child's seat of the cart sat her baby, Emma, bundled in a faded pink blanket. The little girl's eyes followed every bright color that flashed by: boxes of cereal, the shining foil of candy wrappers, the bright yellow of the discount signs. She didn't yet understand what those things meant. She only knew her mother's voice, soft and trembling, whispering small reassurances that things were okay. But they weren't okay. Not really. Sarah tried to make lists before she came to the store, strict, careful lists that made sure every dollar counted. She'd written this one on the back of an old envelope, the ink already smudged from her fingers. Bread, milk, diapers, wipes, baby formula. That last one was the hardest to write. She'd paused in the baby aisle, staring at the rows of formula cans lined up like soldiers. Each brand promised something: comfort, nutrition, easy digestion, happy babies, but what Sarah saw was the small white sticker beneath them, the price written in bold black numbers that made her chest tighten. $34.99. She took one can off the shelf, turning it in her hands. It felt heavier than it should have, as if the weight of it carried all her exhaustion, all her fear. She looked at Emma, who had started chewing on the corner of her blanket. "You need this, baby," she whispered. "Mama's gonna figure it out." But she didn't know how. She'd already checked her account that morning, $21.36 left until her next paycheck. Rent was due in 3 days. The landlord had already been patient, too patient. And her car's gas tank was nearly empty. She'd told herself she could make the formula stretch, just a few more days. Water it down a little more. But last night, Emma had cried for hours. Her small body curled up, her stomach empty, her cries cutting through the apartment like knives. Sarah had sat on the floor, holding her, tears slipping down her own face as she hummed an old lullaby from her mother. She'd promised herself she wouldn't let that happen again. So she came to the store today, hoping something would work out. Maybe a sale, maybe a mistake at the register in her favor. Maybe a small miracle. She placed the formula in the cart. Her heart raced like she'd done something wrong, even though she hadn't. She made her way to the checkout line, counting the few items she had: a loaf of bread, a gallon of milk, a pack of diapers, and the can of formula. The cashier was a young man, probably in college. He smiled politely, scanning each item, the small beeps punctuating the air. Sarah avoided his eyes. "That'll be $52.17, he said. Her throat went dry. She reached into her purse, pulling out her worn wallet. The plastic edges of her debit card were cracked. She knew what the balance was. She knew what was going to happen, but she tried anyway. She inserted the card, holding her breath. A few seconds later, the small screen blinked, declined. Her stomach dropped. "Oh, can you try again?" she said, forcing a smile that didn't reach her eyes. The cashier nodded, glancing at the growing line behind her. She could feel the impatience building, the weight of eyes on her back. She tried again. Declined. This time, the cashier gave her a sympathetic look. "Do you maybe want to take something off?" Her hands trembled slightly. She looked down at the items, her mind racing. The diapers, no, she needed those. The milk, she needed that too. The bread was dinner for the next few days. Her eyes landed on the formula. For a second, she couldn't breathe. She thought of Emma crying last night. She thought of the ache in her arms as she rocked her baby to sleep without being able to feed her. But she also thought of the landlord's quiet warnings, the overdue bills stacked on the counter. Her face burned with shame as she reached for the can, her hand slow, hesitant. I'm just gonna leave this one," she said quietly. The cashier nodded, setting it aside. "No problem." But the moment wasn't small. It felt like the world had stopped, and everyone could see her. A mother who couldn't afford to feed her child. She could hear the whisper of a woman behind her, "That's so sad," and the quiet sigh of someone else shifting impatiently. Sarah wanted to disappear. She forced herself to stand straight, to smile as if it didn't matter, as if she didn't care. She paid for the remaining items with cash, her hands shaking slightly as she handed over crumpled bills. When the transaction was done, she mumbled a thank you and walked away, her heart hollow. The formula sat behind her on the counter, abandoned and out of reach. Outside, the sky had darkened. The parking lot shimmered with puddles from the morning rain. She loaded her groceries into the back seat of her old sedan, the door creaking. Emma fussed, her small whimpers tugging at something deep inside Sarah. "It's okay, baby," she whispered, kissing her forehead. "Mama's gonna make it okay." She got into the driver's seat, but she didn't start the car. Her eyes blurred with tears. She tried to blink away. She sat there, her hands gripping the steering wheel, the world outside blurred through the windshield. She didn't notice the man standing a few registers down inside the store, still holding a basket with a few items, a loaf of bread, some fruit, and a newspaper. He had watched the scene quietly, unnoticed. His name was David Langford. Most people in town knew the company he ran, the large manufacturing firm that employed hundreds. But few people knew what he looked like. He rarely came into the local supermarket, his assistant usually handled that sort of thing. But today, he'd stopped by on his way home from visiting one of the factories. He liked seeing real people, the kind who made his company's products mean something. When he saw Sarah standing there, her shoulders tense, her face a mixture of pride and pain, something inside him twisted. He had seen that look before, years ago, in his own mother's eyes, when she'd stood in line at a similar store, deciding between paying for groceries or gas. He didn't say anything as she walked out. He didn't even move for a moment. Then he picked up the can of formula the cashier had set aside. "Hey," he said quietly to the young man. "She didn't take this." The cashier shook his head. "No, her card didn't go through. Happens sometimes." David looked down at the can. The small sticker, $34.99, seemed insignificant compared to what he'd just seen. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his wallet. "I'll take it," he said. The cashier scanned it. "Do you want a bag?" "No. Just the receipt, please." He paid, slipped the receipt into his jacket pocket, and carried the formula with him as he left the store. Outside, he saw her car, a small, faded blue sedan parked near the back of the lot. The rear bumper was dented, the paint chipped, but there was a small sticker on the back window that read, "Baby on board." He walked over quietly, not wanting to startle her. She was still sitting inside, her head bowed slightly, one hand brushing at her eyes. He hesitated for a moment, unsure how to approach without embarrassing her. He knew pride was a fragile thing, especially for someone fighting just to stay afloat. So instead of knocking on the window, he placed the can of formula gently on the hood of her car, right where she would see it when she looked up. Then he tucked the receipt underneath, waited by the can so it wouldn't blow away. No note. No signature. Just the gift. He turned and walked away, his breath clouding in the cool air. As he reached his car, he looked back once. She was lifting her head, her brow furrowing as she noticed the object on the hood. She opened the door slowly, stepping out. Her eyes widened when she saw the formula. For a long moment, she just stood there, staring at it, confusion and disbelief washing over her face. She looked around the parking lot, but there was no one near. Just the hum of distant engines, the rustle of wind. Her lips trembled as she picked it up, clutching it to her chest. She whispered something under her breath, maybe a thank you, maybe a prayer. Inside the car, she placed the formula gently beside Emma, her eyes glistening. "See, baby," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Told you Mama would make it okay." She didn't know who had done it, or why. But for the first time in a long time, she felt seen. Not pitied. Just seen. And that made all the difference. As she drove away, David watched from his car, the faintest smile on his lips. He didn't need her to know who he was. He didn't do it for recognition. He did it because he could, and because once, someone had done something similar for his own family when times were hard. That night, he went home to his large, quiet house overlooking the city. He poured himself a glass of water and stood by the window, thinking about the look on her face when she saw the formula. He realized that success wasn't measured by quarterly reports or profits. It was measured in moments like that, small acts of grace that rippled outward. Sarah, meanwhile, put Emma to bed that night with a full belly. She sat in the dim light of the small apartment, holding the empty can from earlier in her hands. It was such a simple thing, a small metal container, but it represented something larger: hope, kindness, humanity. She didn't know who had paid for it. Maybe a stranger. Maybe an angel. All she knew was that someone had cared enough to see her when she thought she was invisible. The next day, she went back to work cleaning houses, humming softly as she worked. Her steps felt a little lighter. The world didn't seem so cruel. And though she would never know the name of the man who had helped her, she carried his kindness with her everywhere. Weeks later, she came across a job posting on the bulletin board outside the grocery store: administrative assistant needed, Langford Industries. She almost didn't apply. But something in her told her to try. She got the job. And months later, when she finally met David Langford, the CEO she'd only ever heard of, she recognized him instantly, though she couldn't quite place where from. He greeted her kindly, not mentioning the past, though his eyes held a knowing softness. And in that silent understanding between them, gratitude bloomed, a reminder that sometimes, the smallest act of kindness can change the entire course of a life.